Had to do my little fade out there.
Nice.
Um, Hi, welcome to the Mainline broadcast live. This is our second edition and a Labor Day edition. I'm so excited to be joined with Siobhán from Down South News. Thank you so much for tuning in to have this conversation and finally do a show together.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Are you into like ambient electro music at all? Like
hmm
what we just played?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
Uh,
actually listen to it all the time just as like ambiance, like background to my life. Yeah, it's great.
Well, you would really like that artist. Her name is Crystal V. She's actually going to be DJing at the upcoming Music Fest in Atlanta, the one that I can't shut up about, and I will not until it is over. But
Relentlessly shilling is very, very all right.
yeah,
Sweet.
the Mainline Music Fest, September 5th through 7th. If you're in the area, come check it out. It's a big support for Mainline this year. But yeah, we did a whole episode about that last week, and I'm really excited to jump in and talk more on the side of political organizing and other things going on in the world. But first, Siobhan, I would love if you could introduce yourself, talk about Down South News, and a little bit of the work that you do.
Yeah. Um, yeah, hello. I'm Siobhán. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And yeah, I started Down South News back in May of 2025 with the specific scope of sharing about mutual aid efforts in the South. And that just, it felt right to me because there is so much that goes on down here, but a lot of people just don't know about it. And even within the South, it's hard to like get connected with other people doing mutual aid. It's like there are networks for like the Carolinas, for example, and down in Texas, and of course a lot going in Atlanta. But it's just even the couple months that we've had it going, the feedback has been incredible. Of like, oh my gosh, I had no clue this was a thing, or wow, that's a cool idea. Let me replicate that where I'm at. So it's been pretty great, and yeah, that's the basic premise of Down South.
I was so excited to learn about you and Down South News, and the way that I found out about you was when you covered an event that happened here at this very building where I'm at. I'm at Liminal Space, where Mainline Studios is in Atlanta, but you covered Kiss and Ride's Queer Rage event, and one of our collective members like saw it and had shared it, and I was like, oh, who is this person? What is Down South News? I was like very excited because it felt like, just from looking at the bits of coverage that you had done, um, it just seemed a lot like kind of like why Mainline started, Mainline's roots. And I'm really curious if you could share more on like why you started Down South News and like what void, if any, you feel like this like desire is filling.
Yeah, I mean, it comes like from a selfish, I think like from a selfish place, I struggle to like, I'm like, I'll see stuff going on and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I wish I would have learned about it when it started. Like, even within my own state, there are organizations in like Greensboro and Raleigh and Wilmington, like across the state that like I've been involved in mutual aid for years and I would only hear about them, you know, in like the past month or something like that. So I definitely think in terms of like surfacing what's going on, I've personally felt that there's a void, and the feedback we've gotten so far has like validated that as a need to just even have visibility into what's happening. Because like I definitely see a lot of what goes on in New York, right? Like that has a lot of coverage. LA has a ton of coverage, but in the South, like there isn't as much. It's not as sexy. Like there's a ton of organizing going on down here, but it doesn't get the same type of coverage um, because like I guess you could consider Atlanta a metropole, like similar to NYC or LA, but it just yeah, the reporting is not as prevalent and not as like lifted up. So yeah, it really felt like something that was like, oh, this is something worth investing in and valuable, and it's proved out pretty well so far.
Yes, there's a ton of research and media criticism that support like what you're saying, which is essentially a geographical bias towards the South when it comes to news and media resource allocation. And that's a huge reason why like Mainline exists and why we do the work the way that we do it. And Yeah, I just am so I think, like, discovering you and, like, meeting you, it was, like, a breath of fresh air. I was just like, "Ah, it's so good to see, like, more people." We need, like, narrative warfare right now. So it's like that means we need an abundance. There shouldn't be a conglomeration of sources. There shouldn't be like, one or just a few doing it. Like what we're up against when it comes to like right wing, not only right wing media, but quote unquote neoliberal and centrist media, which just like favors the right ultimately, along with right wing think tanks and like the fascist administration. We're just up against a lot, and we need like an abundance of storytelling and sources. And I agree with you that I think that's interesting. You said that the South might not, quote unquote, be like sexy, but it's like national media only wants to cover the South when there's like, it's like we're the damsel in distress, like, or something. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, but
Yeah.
actually, like, if you pay attention and if you know, um, a lot of cultural resistance begins in the South, and then it's like exported outside of that. Case in point, Stop Cop City, I think, is a good example of that, where, and it's a difficult year, I've said in other programming, to be in Atlanta because it's a big, like, told you so moment, but not
Mm.
wanting to be an asshole about it. Which leads me to one of the first topics I know that we wanted to talk about was mutual aid as infrastructure. And when I asked you like what you wanted to talk about today, this was like one of your top things. And I know it relates to your vision at Down South News. So like talk to me about mutual aid as infrastructure and the importance of that and how you define that.
Yeah. So I get a lot of questions about like why are you as a person and also Down South News so like laser focused on mutual aid, and like why are you constantly shilling for people? Like I think every single video we've had so far, I ended with like, and make sure to like find mutual aid efforts near you and just start showing up. Like why are you such a shill about this? And of course, like baseline, like helping each other, like feeding each other, giving each other masks and COVID tests and all sorts of resources. Like that's good and important. And like there's a reason that the Black Panther Party called it like survival programs. And they articulated it saying, like, yeah, sure, like our issues are systemic, but until we can change the system, we have to survive. And it's going to be necessary to do so and like help each other and take care of each other. So, like, baseline, that is mutual aid. That is the face value of doing mutual aid, is we're helping each other survive, and like that's pretty inarguable. But what I love to talk about with mutual aid is often there's a criticism that it's like a band-aid solution, that like, oh, you're not solving the systemic issues. Like, even I was talking with someone the other day and they were like, well, like technically couldn't a nonprofit achieve greater scale than your like weekly food not bombs distros and stuff like that? And it's like, yeah, technically, if you could have billions of dollars behind you, but there are issues. That is part of the system that is causing homelessness, houselessness to be a problem in the first place, right? Like, there are criticisms
Anyone
like
that
this.
knows me, I'm sorry, it's just anyone that knows me knows the way I must have internally screamed when you said that bit about like, wouldn't a nonprofit do a better job? Like, anyway, please continue. That was my
Yeah,
reaction.
it's like, let's define better here.
I was like,
Um,
ah.
yeah.
So
No, that was, I hadn't heard that in a minute, and I was like, oh man, let me tell you about the nonprofit industrial complex. But yeah, I also hear it from people that are very like fixated on like building a party, right? They're like, and tear down mutual aid efforts like mass blocks and food not bombs and stuff like that by saying like, well, it's not solving a systemic issue. And what I've really come to be like convicted in, and like like an argument that has been compelling to me, is like, yes, there is the face value, but that is not all there is to mutual aid. Like the layers underneath that are, you are working with people day in and day out and building relationships and networks and supply lines, that can help you well into the future and with other things that come up. So like every week, yeah, you're going out and you're feeding people. Every day you're going and driving and giving people masks. But like, when the state comes down on you and there's repression and like the Stop Cop City movement, like it's the mutual and aid networks down in Atlanta, like that were inspiring to me. Is like, they kept
Mhm.
the tree sitting up for like a year, and you don't do that without having supply lines and robust mutual aid networks that have been working together for years. So like
Mhm.
that's an aspect of it that I really like to focus on, because it's like, if we want to, you scale that up, right? Is like, well, what if there's a prison break? Like, how are we going to feed and house and take care of like these freed prisoners if we really want to talk about revolution? Or like, if you look at any successful revolution in the world, like every single person, like Mao, Che Guevara, like all of like Vietnam, like all of them say, if you don't have a popular cradle of resistance, like you're toast. If you don't have the
Mhm.
popular support and infrastructure in place to take care of people, then like there's no, like, you're not going to win a war. You're not going to be able to change the ultimate system. So even in the realm of like, oh, the issue is scale, or like, like how the issues are systemic, mutual aid also plays a role in that, and by making these like networks of and building trust between people, so when shit hits the fan, you can do stuff and get stuff done.
Mhm. I think for me, like, mutual aid is also a very simple thing, it's not that complicated, and I think a lot more people are engaging with mutual aid and when they don't realize, like, so for example,
Hmm.
if, like, you have a friend or a neighbor who's sick and you make them a plate of food, you just did mutual aid. Like that it's just if you go to a 12-step program for like recovery, that is mutual aid. Like because
Hmm.
it's a free resource and no one is like profiting off of anyone and it's a mutually shared mutual aid resource. It's like we are helping each other with like no strings attached or anything like that. And that to me is something that is important. Sometimes, like, it was one important for me to understand. Like, that's what mutual aid was. Like, years ago, when I first heard the term, I was like, I don't understand what that is. And someone's like, you're literally probably doing it all the time. You just don't even know it's called that. So, like, with
Yeah.
that in mind, like, keep in mind, like, what the state has said about mutual aid in, like, the RICO indictment, for example, against 61 this is like what they're criminalizing is just people helping each other out. Like if you're going to criminalize mutual aid in the Stop Cop City campaign, like community, which was literally just a bunch of locals, people local to Atlanta, people like in this neighborhood and area that did not want a massive police militarization facility built in the forest for many reasons. That's what the movement was, and it was deemed a quote unquote criminal enterprise. And then it also criminalized, it attempts in the indictment, the state attempts to criminalize mutual aid as part of this quote unquote criminal enterprise. That is the narrative that the entire indictment is like on the hook with. It's like what the state has to like prove. But it is like our very state of humanity of just like helping each other.
Hmm.
And like if you're gonna do that, it's like then that like where is the line? Because like if Alcoholics Anonymous is that, if like food drives are mutual aid, that's like why people have been sounding the alarm about this RICO indictment, which is an unprecedented one in size and merit. Um, legal experts and organizers are afraid that this is like kind of the testing ground for like other indictments that could happen against like protest movements across the US. But we will see that because that trial is still dragging on more than 2 years later. We haven't even really gotten into the trials, and people can check out our coverage for that. But also with mutual aid as infrastructure, I think about that a lot too, and how the ultimate goal, I think, in terms of revolution is to minimize our dependence on a harmful state. And for me, like, mutual aid is that because it's like if we provide for ourselves and, like, the sayings like we keep each other safe, which can sound like a cliche after a while, but it really is true. Like anything that mitigates my dependence on the state, which is not a life affirming entity, a state that is
Hmm.
dependent and thriving on the big business of mass incarceration and prison labor. That's what it's all about. The less dependent I am on that, the less power that state has over me, the less power it has over us. And that's why I think mutual aid as infrastructure is the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak. Like, that's why I think it's the smartest thing to invest in because you're literally just investing in ourselves, and that's
Yeah.
also why That's also why Mainline is operating so much on like a mutual aid infrastructure. Like we don't depend on foundations or outside funders for money. Like we literally are just operating off of our grassroots subscriptions, which is like why we do these for subscribers first and then we unlock our episodes later because we really want to encourage people to throw in the tip jar, as we say, because as we're seeing, and we'll get to in our next topic, we're just seeing like mainstream media and corporatized media starting to crumble and dismantle itself in a way. And I'm trying to think of like another point that you said, but just to wrap up, my thoughts on that for right now, it's just that I think it is important that we build mutual aid infrastructure. And I will say, like, out of everything that came out of the past several years since the inception of Cop City, I think the mutual aid networks in Atlanta like really grew to a size that like I had never really experienced. Like when I had a car accident and I had a brain injury, it was the mutual aid like community in Atlanta that people that would like give me rides and like bring me food and like meals. And it also like helped me to lower like my level of consumerism. Like we have just a solidarity economy here where it's like literally anything I need before I go spend money and buy it, I like hit up this network just to see if anyone has it. We can do a trade of some sort. And I just think that is so cool because it feels so like freeing from the capitalist system of like, oh, I need to go to like, some corporation to like buy this thing, and someone else already has it and we'll just give it freely and like vice versa. I don't know if y'all
Yeah.
have that in Charlotte, but it's one thing we have in
We're getting
Atlanta.
there. Honestly, yeah, Atlanta is just like a big inspiration to me because like yeah, I got involved in Stop Cup City in 2022 and just seeing what y'all had down there even then and how it's developed. I was very much like, man, like we need to get cracking on this in Charlotte. So yeah, we're slowly but steadying building it here as well. And it's beautiful to see. Like it's not only just money flowing around, but yeah, it like if people need like I can speak with Mask Block, it's great. Like if any
Mm-hmm.
org or any person needs masks for an event or something like that, we're on it. And like it just the flow keeps going. It also like yeah, also I wanted to know like thank you for defining mutual aid and pointing out that it's simple and not this like academic term. Like I'm so caught in like the conceptual justification for it. It is helpful to point out and it's also like makes it an efficient call to action of like, hey, no one can argue with this. Like, hey, are you
Oh
depressed
yeah.
about the state of the world? Just go feed people. Like, just show up. That's all you need to do to start.
Yeah, I feel
Um,
like the attorney general in Georgia is going to have a real hard time convincing a jury that mutual aid is evil, especially because it's something that people engage in every day, whether they realize it or not. And we haven't even made it to like juries, like really even hearing trials yet. Like we're still like
mhm.
in pre-jury selection stages because of the like clusterfuck that this trial has been. Again, people can go to Mainline's website and read like our whole catalog of the updates of like Rico so far. But yeah, it's like you're gonna have because like I guess like anarchy or an anarchism has already like a stigma wrapped around it where that's kind of like like annoying. People don't understand what anarchy is, so it's like gotta unpack that. But then it's like you bring mutual aid into it, it's like good fucking luck spinning that narrative because literally like any person on that jury that has done someone a favor
Yeah. 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 You have not profited off of someone. Okay, cool.
like has
You're
done anyone a
guilty.
favor out of the goodness of their heart. That is mutual
Yeah.
aid. That is
Yeah.
literally
No,
what it is.
literally down in Houston Food Not Bombs, I think it was like 2 years ago, they kept on getting tickets. And this is also something I like.
I remember
Uh,
this too.
Yeah, they kept getting tickets. They got like 90 something tickets before like the pigs finally took it to court and like tried to get a jury together and like actually sue them to get it like to prevent them from doing distributions. Um,
Hmm.
they couldn't even get a jury together who would agree that it could be possible that feeding someone is a crime. And so the case just got dropped and Houston Food Not Bombs won. And
A
part of
fucking
that is
man.
like what I like am an absolute broken record on down south of like yes, it's important to fight this stuff in the courts. It's important to raise awareness, all this stuff. But also, the reason that they're won and they are continuing is because they continued in spite of the citations, in spite of the repression. And like when you are convicted and like decide that you're going to do it anyways, even if the state says this is illegal, then you win. Like, and building the infrastructure to do that, even under the conditions that the state is attacking you, is really powerful. And like that's where I see the long term role of like mutual aid infrastructure playing.
Yeah, and I will, before we go into our next piece, and it kind of relates to what I'm about to say, the mutual aid and community has also like increased the longevity of my participation in journalism. Like, I think I would have been out of journalism 5 years ago if it were not for like mutual aid community, because like I've had to, humbly go to community to be like, hey, like, I don't get paid for this work. And also, like, I'm not making enough money to like live, like, especially when I was leaving like an abusive relationship. So like a lot of DV and gender-based violence survivors, like the trauma of like leaving and surviving something like that can take a toll on you where like you can't work. And then also like I had the car accident. So I've just like the community has like carried me literally, like even like financially at times, like beyond just like food and like rides and stuff. But like it also like saved me from like having like worse detriment on my health. It saved me from
Mhm.
like going to work at also, I believe that we need to provide provisions for our own people to also like lessen the, chances of people going to work for complicit corporations and things like that. So, but and then the last thing I want to say with the Food Not Bomb story, like I was just thinking about how like here in Atlanta, they've like attempted to do the same thing. Like I feel like the unhoused population are always kind of the first, like they're one of the most vulnerable
Mhm.
populations because they're just literally on the streets. But there's mutual aid like efforts here, and it seems like we're looking towards the World Cup, like we're in the World Cupification of Atlanta. So like the
Mhm.
1996 Olympics were like very historical because they literally did sweeps to make way for all the tourists that came for the Olympics. And that's how the Atlanta City Detention Center was formed, was to have a place to literally to lock up unhoused people that they cleared off the streets for the
To
Olympics. And
concentrate marginalized people, that's so weird. We've never seen that before.
mhm. Yeah,
Yep.
and now it's I just wanna draw attention to the recent, deal that happened in the Fulton County Commissioner's, office, where in Atlanta, they had, approved a God, it's gonna be, like, so, hard to say this because it feels, like, unreal. Um, $1.2 billion dollars for an expansion of the Rice Street Jail, Fulton County Jail in Atlanta.
Which is
And
just
I have,
abysmal. Like,
yeah, and we reported that on Mainline. Would love to have like an episode about that. But this
mhm.
deal came up a couple years ago, and I remember it got shot down in 2020, December 2023, because I remember like where I was when I heard about it, and it got shut down, and it came back up. Um, so yeah, just something for folks to pay attention to as we get closer and closer to the World Cup, and we're undergoing this World Cupification of Atlanta. And with our next topic, we wanted to talk. This was my personal request that Siobhán said they would happily discuss with me. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is Atlanta's legacy publication, announced that it will end its print distribution beginning January 1st of 2026, meaning December 31st will be their last like print publication. The publisher, Andrew Morse, actually announced this in the New York Times, I believe. And I want to pull that up because I thought it was interesting that there was a media splash about it overall, but App and Media which is another local media source, reference the New York Times as its, you'll see my lovely paywall for New York Times, so I can't even see it. But so I can't even show it, so I don't pay for the New York Times because fuck the New York Times. But I thought it was interesting that the publisher of the AJC took to, a flagship publication like the New York Times, also known as the New York War Crimes, by the Writers Against War on Gaza, to announce the end, that they were going to stop publishing their print newspaper. And I have some thoughts about this, obviously, but Siobhán, I just am really curious about your initial reactions to that news, and you specifically paired it to the surveillance state, and I wanted to hear more about that.
Yeah, the timing is just so on the nose because I've been following the developments with particularly the age restrictions that are going in place throughout the West on every platform from Spotify to YouTube to Facebook. Everything is now within the course of a week. It went from I first saw that thing on the news. It's been a thing for a while where they want to do age verification under the guise of protecting children, but anyone who is anyone in the privacy realm is absolutely not. This is totally just increasing surveillance. They want pictures of your license. They want to be able to track you everywhere with more and more accuracy. But truly, I think it was 3 weeks ago. Over the course of a week, it was every country in the West was instituting these new rules. And it was a very clear combination with the news that Palantir is now doing deals with the Department of Defense. There are a lot of dots that are being connected right now of oh, they are very much consolidating this censorship and surveillance state. And it's, I mean, the ruling class of America, the US, and the West in general have made it pretty clear they don't like TikTok because they don't want people hearing about Palestine. And they're starting to take very direct action towards more and more control over these traditional avenues. And digital is just easier to control than analog media, right? It's very easy for streaming services to take off content. We're constantly seeing this, and
That
there's
is
been a
so
move
true.
towards physical media, but that seems to be the motivation here, and it seems to be in lockstep with this pattern of the general dictate right now is consolidate, consolidate, so that we can have as much control as possible over the information that's being spread and received in the West.
I use a paywall bypass to get past the
Hell
paywall so that
yeah.
I could pull this up. That is such an excellent point, and I think that is also very helpful for me because as I've started to process this pretty mildly, I mean, the tone of it is that this is this isn't, he says in this quote, everything we're doing is designed to protect the journalism.
Mm.
And I read only a little bit of commentary online in the discourse of just people's reactions. And there was kind of a strange take from some people that reacted to it. I don't think this is majority discourse, but people being decrying it kind of as part of AJC is almost like a casualty of the crises that are happening in journalism, which I feel people are just not really making the
Yeah.
connections that are
Are you
required
familiar with
to
Cox
really
Enterprises?
right. And not a lot of people are. So I was actually contacted by a reporter at the AJC because they wanted to interview me about the Mainline Music Fest happening September 5th through 7th. And I told them absolutely not because part of the I told them that it would be a betrayal of our values to promote our festival via the AJC, which although it's a huge platform, it would maybe help us raise a little bit more money. That's it would be a huge betrayal to our values and also the community when it's and I did write her back specifically and say that I was turning down the interview because it was AJC and because the AJC directly caused Cop City's success in being built.
Mhm.
Via, more specifically, Cox Enterprises, the parent company of AJC, the CEO, Alex Taylor, in 2021 was the literal chairperson for the fundraiser for Cop City on the Atlanta Police Foundation. So this was like a little fun fact that would be buried in, it would either not be disclosed at all, or it would be like kind of the disclosure would be like sandwiched in paragraphs. And like there was a very abysmal August 2021 editorial that ran on a print, I believe, on a Sunday, and it was published online as well. And it had this like disclaimer, but it was sandwiched in between in the article, not like front and center, if I recall correctly. But the headline was like essentially like, we need Cop City to be built as soon as possible. That's like essentially what this editorial by the AJC editorial board was saying. And that same year, they started a section called Voices Against Violence, quote unquote, where they would publish, like, while Mainline is doing its thing, like having broke the story, doing all this investigation and research into the facility, didn't even get around to really even like getting to report on everything that we found, because it was just like onslaught day after day after day after day after day of dealing with not only like uncovering and researching and doing our own reporting, but also like having to put out misinformation fires and being overwhelmed with the propaganda and the barrage of misinformation and unbalanced reporting from the AJC to like make this facility happen. So like to manufacture the cause and the consent for this facility, which is like going to do nothing but cause harm. Like if you consider it from the policing side of things, if you consider it from the climate side of things, like somewhere, and then like everything in between, like this facility was not necessary. They cut a lot of corners to get it done. And I would wager it's not even legal. And it's nothing but a glorified and justified land grab. Like the Atlanta Police Foundation snatched up 381 acres of land for a whopping $500 total, $50 a year for 10 years, $500 total. This is a fact that's like not, in our media trainings and Mainline, we talk about things like framing, and this is like one of those things of like, as a reporter and an editor and a publication and wherever you are in that, like you have choices and responsibilities. That's what it all comes down to. And framing is such a major device and like connecting the dots, but you basically like have to choose like what data and facts am I going to include in the story? Where am I going to put them? How am I going to position them? Or am I going to kind of like hide it? Or am I going to like contort things? And so the AJC like had all these like missteps and like lack of ethics. So when I saw that AJC was not like going to cease its print publication, like I didn't perceive it. I perceived it as nothing more than a business decision. It's something that is benefiting the partners and the funders and the advertising partners at AJC. Like, I don't believe for a second that AJC is like, we're doing this out of the good of our hearts to like help our audience, because the AJC has like, and Cox Enterprises has done a lot to create this very scarce, harmful, like precarious journalism crisis that we are in locally in Atlanta. They have created this like landscape. And prior to being AJC, it was the Journal and the Constitution, which going all the way back to the Reconstruction era in 1906, directly incited the Atlanta 1906 race riots by publishing false headlines saying that Black men were raping white women. And I wrote about this for Scalawag, if anyone is interested in reading it. And I will share that on my screen shortly. But it's a business decision and nothing more. But to anyone who thinks for a second that this is about the AJC somehow being like a casualty to the crisis that they have helped manufacture through like media conglomeration, creating news deserts, particularly like they stopped distributing papers, and the allocation of resources in AJC, which I started to research some time ago, particularly in low income, predominantly Black parts of Atlanta, they've already been susceptible to like this news desert and like lack of media, coverage, and like resources and media are not limited to where the papers are actually being distributed, but it's also like about like how the newsroom is dedicating its time and what it's covering and how much time it's spending covering that. So like Southeast Atlanta, like where Cop City has been built, has already been like susceptible and part of this news desert for a long time. And lastly, yeah, I was gonna say that, the AJC has incited harm like from the gut. So I think for me, my
Mhm.
personal note was like, yeah, you have to let the tower fall. And hopefully this like creates more space for a resurgence of like other print media to start. Like I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And yeah, I ultimately think like in the lens of like the general consolidation of information infrastructure and like reporting infrastructure and stuff like that, as they like as like the ruling class and like the people that control like media outlets, like traditional media outlets, as they consolidate their control in whether it's to get more money out of people, to like get more data out of people to then sell and thereby get more money, like what, but throughout or whatever means it is, if they totally just like come out of the physical media landscape, it's a massive opportunity. Like I think ultimately it's a strategic error to try and do this because people do have like a friction elasticity that if it's like too much of a pain in the ass to do something, they will look elsewhere. And that is where independent media can have a role, where like independent media is like explicitly like not only like open to and advocates of like open media, like transparent media, but also like has a competitive advantage that way because they aren't as like they don't have as much overhead. Like you just have to pay your people. Like you're not trying to dominate an ecosystem. You're just trying to do the work. So ultimately, yeah, I mean, same broadly with like the empire dying and constricting inwards, like it comes with horrors. It also leaves a lot of opportunity for good things to grow, now that the boot is not on your neck as much, and I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
case for traditional media as well. I've seen a massive, I mean, Mainline is indicative of this, and then also just a lot of like influencers that I follow or like study the patterns of, a lot of people are moving to like things like Substack and building up alternative like power bases and distribution networks, because everyone kind of sees the thing like the event coming down the line of like, I think it's TikTok is getting transitioned into a entity that's owned by Oracle come like quarter one of 2026. I believe that was the most recent update. And so it's like a lot, like we all see it coming of like these traditional platforms are going to get more and more constricted. So moving to like things like Substack and in mailing lists that are a lot more resistant, censorship resistant, is a direction that I see a lot of people going.
Yeah, I love your point about how like this decision also is probably a result of like more of a desire to control their audience. Like, and through the surveillance. And it's interesting because like Appen Media, which is another media source in Atlanta, and I know one of the like I know Carl Appen, who like it's a family owned media company. They have a lot more, they're bigger than Mainline, but I know Carl personally and consider him like a comrade in independent media. And he's been very helpful to me with some coverage. But we met when I was covering the Sandy Springs, some Sandy Springs legislation that was written by ADL. I wrote about it for The Intercept. This is how I met Carl, who like helps run Appen Media. While AJC is citing like how low their print distribution is and that it's kind of like dying out or whatever, Appen Media, on the other hand, is reporting having like extremely, big growth spurts in print media. So like I
Hmm.
also think it's like erroneous to say that like, well, people aren't engaging with print media, but I go back to kind of the news deserts issue where it's just like when you cut out analog media, you're also discriminating against, I think, like a generation of people that don't, use like digital media as much. There's a lot of folks like in lower income districts in Atlanta that don't have access to technology and like the internet. and also like in extremely rural parts of Georgia. And it also kind of makes me think about like, does this kind of actually like help contribute to media illiteracy, which has been a bit of like an issue that more people have been talking about, like the growing media illiteracy issue. So curious what your thoughts are on that, if you have any.
Yeah, it's a good question because like what you named earlier with like the AJC like literally doing like inciting race riots and running propaganda for Cop City. On one hand, it is like, yeah, if people have less access to media, that is general like less access to information, access to media. That's not good. We want this stuff to be accessible. Where my mind goes, the flip side of that is it's like AJC does a lot of propaganda and a lot of these like mainstream media outlets do a lot of propaganda. And so if they're making themselves less accessible to people, that feels like okay, like you're dismantling your own propaganda machine. Okay, like thanks, and that leaves openings for more like on the ground media to come in. So I agree. Like, it's definitely harmful to cut off access, and like the most disadvantaged and marginalized in the U.S. are going to be impacted the most by that. I also see it as like possibly harm reduction if
That's
they're
I was literally
dismantling,
just gonna say that. Yeah.
right? Like if they're dismantling their own like propaganda machine, then I guess there's a benefit there.
If y'all think that's a good business decision, like let big business destroy
Yeah.
itself. Because like I also just disagree. I think people are actually trying to we talked about this on our episode last week and we were talking about music, but we were talking about this kind of return to nostalgia and also people wanting to use like analog, music distribution, analog instruments, like leaning more towards like this, like a lot of there's like a shoegaze resurgence that's been going on, and we were talking about that on the show. But reflective of how people feel safer in like analog media versus digital because of the global surveillance state, like what you're talking about, and how like things are so chaotic, like digitally. Like it's like the
Hmm.
internet used to be like this weird mall, and now it's just like a really crazy fucking scary place. Like, and I just think that, there's a lot of old heads and a lot of people that are running like, sorry, I shouldn't say old heads. I just like, there's just a lot of people like big business has come in to start controlling media. Like in 2021, I believe it was reported that like 50% of like local newspapers were being run by hedge funds or other financial institutions. And in the case of
Hmm.
the AJC, like you can think of Cox Enterprises as that financial institution. Like Cox is one of the wealthiest families, like in the so-called U.S. So it's not necessarily like a family paper. It's just like they have like so much money. So that's the other thing. It's just like when you have that much money and then like this is your choice. Like, but at the same time, I'm like, cool. Like I was in the coffee shop like the other day and I saw like a print issue of AJC with some like wacky headline about data centers and how data centers need access to more power to like run efficiently. And I just like, it seemed like friendly coverage and also like, way too friendly of coverage about like what's going on with ICE in Savannah and talking about how like doing a profile on like, oh, like in Savannah, like ICE rides with the police officers. Like it was just kind of like it's like this is not the coverage that we need. So it's like, you know what? If I never have to see one of these again, and they're like
Yeah.
their function is just not put in front place of someone who, you know, might not have the media analysis or like the filter that I do because I've worked in journalism for 10 years plus, like, so be it, So I guess like TLDR is like AJC announced it's ending its print distribution. I'm like, huh, okay, that's weird. Kind of don't care. Like, get the fuck out of here. Is how I feel about it. And they're doing it
Yeah.
by choice. So if anyone's like upset about it, that's why I invite them to like it's gonna be on the people, back to what we were talking about with mutual aid as infrastructure. It's gonna be like on us to provide each other information, to provide each other accurate information, and to keep each other informed because through keeping each other informed, we keep each other safe. So like the chemical fire that happened last year, the
Hmm.
biochemical fire, the news was very slow to pick that up, actually. Like, it was one of those things where like I was experiencing it because I was on a walk and like it had come to like where I live and the air smelled like chlorine. And I like literally tried to see if there was any news about it. There was nothing on there. The city was extremely late on anything. The only thing that I was getting like info from was people on Signal talking to each other. Like there's this big like community like in Signal, like a lot of different locales have them. And like I'm in like artist chats, like Atlanta musicians chats, like Atlanta media workers chats, like and people being like, hey, has anyone noticed that like does it smell like chlorine where anyone is? Like, does anyone like feel like they're
Hmm.
inhaling chemicals? Like what's going on? So like as we see like institutions like AJC start to, you know, like, you know, decidedly make them like dismantle themselves like one way or the other, or on the other end, as we see institutions like become progressively more harmful and escalate, it's going to be up to us as a people. That's why we do the media trainings at Mainline, because like we know that we need to start arming each other with tools and information and skills to pick up those torches, whether it's like a paid job or not. It's just going to become
Hmm.
like, I think media is going to become more and more of a mutual aid practice.
Yeah, I think that's a good read. It like, yeah, capital's just going to consolidate towards profit margins, where profit margins are fat, and the profit margins on media is not a whole lot unless you are like using it to get people's data. Like I think that's kind of the that's the
Mm,
business decision aspect of it, is like, hey, we can't collect, identification email information very easily with print media, but we cannot digitally. But I also totally agree, like it's going to come down to, we keep us safe, quite literally. We only have us to rely on. And I'm also such a Signal shill. Like I love it so much. And like Signal's a nonprofit
Signal
and
is great.
everything. Yeah, but ultimately, like end to end in communication, and really relying on people locally to you, like not really building relationships. Like I've recently started posting on my like Signal stories instead of like my personal Instagram stories, and it's just been so much more rewarding because it's people I like actually know, like IRL recently like work with, and so I mean, socially, it's more rewarding. But I also think, yeah, like that's where we're trending towards, because not only are the main media outlets not reporting on it, like are super late,
Hmm.
but when they do, they're basically doing propaganda. Like they're doing counterinsurgency.
Exactly.
Like, don't be mad about this because actually it's not that bad. East
And
Palestine,
somehow it's your fault. And somehow it's probably your fault.
yeah, no,
Like the working
exactly.
class
What
people.
I think in the UK they're saying like, oh yeah, all these data centers are coming online. That means you need to take shorter showers because we're running low on water. It's like, oh, okay, that's media now. Okay, cool. I'm
So,
happy to
the
see that.
climate change crisis, you should actually internalize all the shame for that because that's you for
Uh,
not for using plastic straws and not recycling
mhm.
properly.
Recycle. That's gonna save the world.
I was an associate producer for a show that never went to air, but it was about like the waste, it was called Wasteland. It was like the about like the overflow of waste in different communities, and it was like in conjunction and covering the climate change crisis. And it was through working on that and the research and interviews I did where I like learned, concretely that like, there was like a lot of the things that we learned like when we were younger about like recycling and all the pressure, like all this emphasis on like it's not that we shouldn't be doing those things. It was just that there was like an overemphasis on all these things with like, but like don't worry about no fossil fuels. Like, no,
Yeah,
that's that's not a thing. Like just recycle, and if you're not doing it enough, it's like your fault. Because the feeling shame around climate disaster is a whole thing, but it's like we need to put pressure on the primary cause of this, which is the fossil fuel industry. And like a lot of organizers were big about that, saying like it's the fossil fuel industry. It's an industry where business choices are being made to
yeah.
cause this. So that might be a good segue into our last topic in the rundown, which was one that you threw up. So, non-electorialism, why don't you dig into this for us? Start answering this question.
Yeah. Like
Can we vote our
the
way out of this? Like everything we've talked about
yeah,
in the show, we can vote our
it's
way out, right?
yeah, just as effectively as carbon footprint will help solve the climate crisis. Actually, I think it's a fantastic segue. And I mean, on Down South News on our like TikTok and Instagram page, like our tagline is like sharing non-electoral organizing in the South. So we've made a very like specific choice to be like that we are explicitly not like uplifting electoral organizing or like putting effort here. What you're talking about with like you make choices as a reporter of what you emphasize and how you frame things and stuff like that. It's a very explicit choice that we've made, and a big emphasis on that is honestly what we were just talking about is a great example of like, yeah, sure, recycling, you could talk about its merits. Carbon footprint, you could talk about its merits. Ultimately it is a tactic of like counterinsurgency. Like BP in the 80s and 90s did like rooms full of people and they like polled them on what they responded the most to, what they thought was the most compelling, and they came away with things like recycling and carbon footprint that would most effectively put the blame off of them. And
Mhm.
I have consistently seen electoralism is the same thing. Like, all right, like a similar thing. I'll do like baseline, and then like above that baseline, like I just think it's an absurd statement that we can achieve a better world through the electoral system of a genocidal slave state that is the U.S. Like I just that statement by itself is absurd to me. So I don't think it's possible. But I also think electoralism often is a tactic used by empire to defang and destroy militant movements. It's an active tactic. It's not just a neutral, useless thing. It is an active tactic that is done and to push resources into this system that ultimately the empire controls the terms of. Like, I was really radicalized on this in the summer of 2023 when there was a 13-hour long public comment against Cop City, and people were just railing against it. This was at city council, and nobody
Mhm.
wanted it. It was
That wasn't
very
even the
clear.
first one either.
Yeah, yeah. Was it the longest one? I feel like it was,
So
or
in
maybe the last one.
2023, I remember that was like June 5th, 2023, because I was there when I was there on June 5th, 2023, and reporting at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I made a typo, and I was like, "If you saw that, no, you didn't. I'm sleep deprived." But and then in 2021, I'll pull it up, but it was actually a 17-hour public
Oh,
comment
damn.
in 2021, the first one that actually like Cop City did get tabled that first time for a month. AJC ran their whack ass editorial in
Hmm.
August. APF literally lobbied, like paid for a lobbyist and got that shit pushed through in September. And there were more like hours long public comment sessions like in the September vote, but it was like it would be so depressing because this happened in the 2023 one that you mentioned, which was in person. In 2021, it was everything was still like in the pandemic where it was online. But in 2023, it was like even more depressing to be there in person and just watching it at like how some city council people would get up or be on their phones and not paying attention. And then they would vote yes on this as if like nothing just happened. It
Hmm.
was like
Yeah.
that deal was signed, sealed, and delivered. Cop
It's
City
just an
was.
analysis of like control and force. Like it was radicalizing to me because it was just like so clear. I think any hope of mine in like the possibility for change through this system that has been a setup explicitly to maintain slavery and genocidal empire, it was
Mhm.
just gone from my body because it couldn't get more explicit that like this was clearly unpopular, clearly unjustified, and it went through anyways. And yeah, it's here. It was just egregious. So like that was a point for me, like personally, an anecdote. But then immediately afterwards, the referendum initiative started, and a ton of resources started getting poured into this electoral strategy, saying, "Oh, but if we can
Mhm.
just get enough people to sign on, then the city will have to listen to us." And what happened? They got 113,000 signatures, but the city straight up said, like, fuck you. Like, like we're just not going to follow the rules. Sorry. We're going to stuff these in a room somewhere in City Hall and never touch them and pretend like it's not a thing. And it's still not resolved. So, really, the thing is, like, the empire really pushes for things to become electoral and things to get involved, like voting to be the answer and like asking the government to do stuff to be the answer, because the ball is in their court. Like, as soon as you do that, that is saying, hey, now you get to define the terms. If you don't want to do this, you can just tell me no. And what we saw, or at least what I observed in the Stop Cop City movement, is like you could pretty directly track a decrease in militants and militarism of that really, like, I think gave the Stop Cop City movement its spark, because going and doing property destruction and going and doing things that directly impact the profit margins of the people looking to build a military base in one of the largest forests in the South, that was working. That had the ruling class of Atlanta scared. You started to see like a direct relationship between the amount of resources going into the referendum initiative that ultimately got quashed because there was nothing forcing the city to listen to it or follow it, and decrease in militarism of people taking real direct action, which was the groundwork and like the foundation of the movement, and what made it a real threat to the people who sought to create Cop City, this military base.
I pulled up our episode, the one that we did with T, which is what I have shared on the screen right now. So if you subscribe to our Patreon, love all you beautiful people for doing that. You can listen to this amazing 2-hour long conversation that I have with T and T Troutman of Scalawag, editor and author, who is amazing. But we touch on this, and T has a lot to say about the referendum initiative. A lot of people in Atlanta have much to say about the referendum initiative when it comes to South Cop City. And it's in alignment with what you were just saying, which, like, there's, a local frustration. And I think, like, it's, a valid one of, like, how T tells a story of how they, like, had to fly out of Atlanta that specific morning when they voted yes on this budget increase for Cop City. And they flew out. So, like, they got the text when they were, like, literally riding on MARTA to go to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport to fly out. And they announced the referendum like that, like, immediately after. And I was actually at City Hall and remember people saying, like, this is our plan for when they vote yes. We know they're going to vote yes. This is our big plan. And I was like, okay. They're like, do you want to come? I'm like, I don't want to come. Like, no, like, I will need to, like, take a nap and, like, kind of, regroup before I go into a solution space after this, because I was at City Hall for, like, hours and upon hours.
Yeah, it went till like 4 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but anyway, T just saw, like, shares in that episode, and I've heard her share it, like, outside of that, just, like, how wild it was to her that, like, nothing in the city of Atlanta had been disrupted. So, like, she was, at the airport, and her only options for, like, food or drink was, like, Starbucks and, like, Chick-fil-A, and, like, and then, like, Delta's airlines are Delta, which is, like, in the funding web of Cop City as well. Like, you have, like, these big three corporations like Home Depot, Delta, and Coca-Cola that are big time sponsors of, like, the Atlanta Police Foundation and CEOs. Like, we have in Atlanta, we have this thing called the Atlanta Committee for Progress. And it's basically just the mayor and a bunch of CEOs that, navigate this relationship with the police and, like, really wield the wand of, like, gentrification in Atlanta. This is where all these decisions are made. It's like the elite class in Atlanta, and it's, multiracial. It's elite Blacks and whites. And this all goes back to the 1906 race riots. Like, my essay discusses that, how, like, the response from whereas, like, the elite class, like, going into City Hall behind closed doors and saying, that was such an embarrassment for the city of Atlanta. No one will come here if something like that happens again, because there was, like, mayhem and terror in the streets, like, people being killed in the streets. And meanwhile, the Journal and the Constitution is covering shit like Black folks are getting killed in the street, and they are still finding a way to victimize white people and running stories about Black folks with like property damage or like quote unquote vandalism. Like I saw all these
Mm-hmm.
newspaper clippings and it's in the article, but they like close the doors and they're like, it's like 1,000 people, all these developers. It's like the Atlanta Committee for Progress of that day, the mayor, the police, and the media moguls saying like, if we need to keep everyone so busy, like there's a pastor quoted in the journal or the Constitution saying like, we keep everyone busy and they won't be in the streets. We keep everyone working and they won't be in the streets. So this is like where the beginning of like Atlanta, the city too busy to hate, like it became kind of a brand, and like this mindset.
Mm.
And that's like why I tell people like Atlanta is so unique because like you can't just like dissect things through like racial politics because it's also like the Black leadership exists here, like the Black ruling class in Atlanta, which I've had people come on to our programming to speak about that more directly. But it's like an attack on like poor Black folks specifically and working class poor white folks as well, and trying to keep them like, which is also classic, conflict
Mm-hmm.
like theory 101 of that, like, that's why everyone says like it's ultimately a class war at the end of the day. But so the referendum was kind of a turnoff for me, like, which also like it developed more in hindsight because like initially it's like my attitude was like, yeah, we should be trying everything, diversity of tactics. But then I developed kind of a turnoff like around it when I was like, okay, well, the people like behind the referendum that keep justifying it by saying like diversity of tactics don't seem very supportive of other tactics though. Like they kind of want to just say that when it's convenient for them to get money for the nonprofits behind it. And like the referendum got a lot of cash. It got like at least $600,000, I think, from like one source, like one, because like
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that we have like an episode coming out this week about the nonprofit industrial complex, and there's like one organization in particular in Atlanta that dissolved. That's coming out like tomorrow. The Abolitionist Teaching Network dissolved, and we kind of like unpack and dissect the role of the nonprofit industrial complex because we keep seeing it happening time and time and time again. And the reason why this is so like important for this specific conversation about like electoralism and electoral politics is because like the nonprofits like industrial complex has created such a counter revolutionary ecosystem that a lot of people gravitate towards because they think that, and it's like we can believe, like we keep falling for like the illusion of democracy when it's like if you look at like the history of this country, democracy had nothing to do with it. It's always been controlled, managed, and manipulated by people of a certain class, race, and gender. Straight white men, they've had the hold on the narrative for like forever, and if you have enough money to like play that game, they'll play it with you, which is like what we see
Mm-hmm.
happening in the Atlanta way. So the referendum just felt like, especially the like just like folks behind it, where it's just like y'all should know better. But I kind of became disillusioned in like movement spaces because there's a lot of people out here that just like are like, I mean, I'm not. There's just it's not radical. It's counter revolutionary. I'll just like
Yeah.
say that because I'm not trying
No.
to like badmouth people in the referendum. It's like as a tactic though, it was counter revolutionary. It did nothing to disrupt the economy in Atlanta, and therefore like the powers that be didn't give a shit. And there were like open records that show that they did suppress it, but like it's on us as movement and community to find other ways to be disruptive and disrupt like the economy through things like boycott and divestment and strikes. You know what I'm saying? Like, and none of those things were tried. None of them.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think like something you said that you had heard about like the AJC in like the previous topic, like, removing their print media is like the complaint was like, oh, this is the death of media. This is the death of free media. And it's like, really, there's a similar thing with electoralism, which is which lens are you looking at it through? Is it like, oh, this is really bad, it's the death of free media? there's three options really. It's like, this is bad, it's the death of a good thing, it's useless, or actually no, it's actively harmful and this is the removal of a harmful thing. It's like, that's how I reframe like electoralism too. Like, people were upset
Mhm.
about Kamala losing, and I was like, no, actually Democrats are really good at counterinsurgency. They are actively
Yeah.
harmful because they are good at placating and convincing you that progress, like, I like to phrase it this way because it makes it clear how egregious it is, but like, a better world is possible through this genocidal slave state's electoral system. It's like, they are good at convincing people of that. Like, so if you're really grieving like the loss of this like person party that is actively, one, committing a genocide, and two, extremely effective at counterinsurgency, I just disagree with that framing. I think it is like, the Democratic Party is actively harmful, electoralism actively. Oh, heck yeah. I love this definition. Very apropos. I think electoralism is counterinsurgency, and it is managed and strategic and a tactic to like pull away resources from things that actually threaten the empire. And so I just wherever I can find it, I'd like try to break down that framing of it as like, oh, but this is like our liberal democracy. Like, no, that's a tactic. This is propaganda. This is counterinsurgency. It's not only just neutral or useless, right? It is actively harmful, and so that's why we focus on it. Like, make that very explicit down south. And when I'm reporting on things, like, sometimes organizations do take things to the city and like go to city council meetings and complain, but like, in terms of the choices we make, we don't emphasize that. We say, yes, this is happening. More importantly, they are continuing to do the thing in spite of increased like police patrols, in spite of the city sending police to harass them, giving them citations, bringing them to court. In spite of that, they're doing it anyways, and they're taking direct action, not through this completely controlled system that is there to dismantle and defang actually things that would threaten it, but doing it themselves. That explains like the choices that we make and how we report and what we focus on. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to be through a system that is controlled and explicitly there to continue this like horrible, the genocidal like slave state. It's going to be us doing it ourselves and relying on each other to do it. So yeah, I I think that definition is very apropos. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to throw it up because just in case like anyone listening or watching doesn't really know what counterinsurgency is, and it's a word we've like used a lot on this episode. Um, but like I also think of it as like counter revolutionary, like
Mhm.
anything that, is slowing down like true progress through like revolution. And yeah, I think, you brought up the last presidential election and um yeah, so I'm in the state that was like the key battleground state in 2020. Um
Mhm.
I'm in a state where I'm also like it's also the state was like the only city where MLK's hometown, but there were no riots like after MLK was assassinated. And in our conversation with T, she gets into like why that is, and it's like related to like what I was talking about in the Reconstruction era. But a lot of the things that like I've heard and like I've seen kind of parroted in response to anyone who is suggesting that like electoral politics is not going to save us,
Mhm.
there's always kind of a clapback of like, "Oh, you just don't care about your right to vote," or like all this shit. It's just like, "Ugh." So for me, like what I say is this, it's just like I'm all for voting if that's like what you believe in. Also, like by the way, I did research on like what percentage of Americans actually vote, and it's like 60% of Americans don't vote, which like so take that for like what you will. That's just
Yeah.
like
Anyone that
data.
they can say, look, you're a felon. Oh, you don't get that right either. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and let's, like, contemplate the fact that they are criminalizing abortion and miscarriages and making them felonies. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is, like, conversations and, like, where our minds need to be, right? Because, like, watch the documentary 13th on Netflix, like, Ava DuVernay's documentary. I stress watched it multiple times during 2020, very
Mm.
informative, explains how, like, this illusion of democracy is essentially a utopia in people's minds that has been spoon fed to them since like grade school. Like if you were like raised in America, you're fed revisionist history of like, and who do you think
Mm-hmm.
wrote that revised history? Genocidal colonizers, like that have had the hands on the narrative. And that continues to pervade like our media systems. Um, and that's why like movement media, like Down South News and Mainline, is so important, because it's important to shine a light on the other options that are available beyond voting. Because like what if like you can't vote? And also in the South, where it is so restricted and can be fucking downright ableist to be like, well, you need to get to the voting booth no matter, and also classist with like the voter suppression and the restriction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we better be coming up with other plans, because like if you're going to vote for me, it better be a yes and that better
Yeah.
not be the only thing you're doing. That's what people in the South have been saying for quite some time. In 2020, Georgia was like, cool, we're gonna do this for y'all, but like we need everyone else to like step the fuck up, because like in 2020 in Georgia, 2019, I was reporting on like voter suppression. I was reporting on like Stewart Detention Center, where they're fucking taking all these people that are being kidnapped by ICE. I was reporting on that. Hospitals shutting down to make way for these like concentration camps. So I was reporting on that in 2019. People before me were reporting on that. So in 2020, the vibe was like, it was like, everyone, all eyes on Georgia. All that shit went away as soon as like Biden was
Mm-hmm.
elected. We got two Democratic senators in, but we didn't actually flip Georgia blue, because you know who is still controlling Georgia? Fucking Brian Kemp. Like, we're living in Trump's America right now, but we've been living in Kemp's Georgia for quite some time. Uh, Brian Kemp fucking hates Black people. He hates women. He wants to, this like Christian fundamentalist evangelical state bullshit. That's how he stole that election, like against Stacey Abrams, reported on that extensively. So that's why I get so heated, especially for people that are in the South and are just not connected to the struggle, either because they're of a certain class background or they're like feigning ignorance, like, or are sitting at an intersection of like identity where they just haven't been affected yet, or they just like
Mm-hmm.
think they're so comfortable. And it's like, I always say like my song for the Democratic Party is Dirty Work by Steely Dan. And I like voted in 2020, and then I did not vote in 2024 because I literally told the Democratic Party, I was like, I'm not doing this shit for you anymore,
Yep.
because Palestine was a bottom line issue for me. And that can be such, the internalized shame that I felt around that choice is so reflective of like the culture that we have around electoral politics, and also like the shaming that people get for choosing to boycott something. Like I had a weird reaction to like choosing to boycott Spotify or going on strike. Like the culture in Atlanta specifically around like labor, because of our history that I was outlining in the 1906 race riots, like it's like there's so much grind culture and hustle culture in Atlanta too. So it's like if you're not hustling, then like you're being lazy, and that's also so capitalist and puritanical as well. But anyway, that's my rant to anyone who's like, well, you just don't appreciate the sacrifices that people made. It's like, we're airing this on Labor Day, so like in honor of like the people, that led like revolutions. Were those at fucking voting booths? It's like any revolution that has happened was people like taking power into their hands, and like, it's not about violence either. Like the other thing with South Cop City, last thing I'll say is that like something that would be kind of frustrating is that like if you didn't like get behind the referendum, or you wanted to explore other diversity tactics, or you wanted to like, think outside the box or whatever, it'd be like, well, the forest defenders got this like bad rap of being like quote unquote violent, which like none of them were violent, like it was fucking tree sitting, and like property damage does not equal violence, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So like I shed no tears for any like construction vehicles that might have been damaged, like that should be reserved for Tortuguita's family and loved ones, after they were murdered and all of that. But there's like a whole spectrum of things in between, forest defenders and referendum. There's like a whole
Mhm.
spectrum of things between occupying the forest and yelling outside of us, like city council demanding that they do something. And the things like in between for me is labor organizing, boycotting, and strategic divestment campaigns and pressure campaigns on corporations and like building, like being for real about building and sustaining a radical media infrastructure. Like these are
Mhm.
like things, and then like land back.
Yeah, that was what I mean, the movement was grounded in it being Muskogee land, like from the beginning. And like I think that's what gave it a lot of its power. It's the thing that, like, yeah, electoralism is so all encompassing because it's like, if everything has to be about this, and if you do anything more radical, it's going to mess it up for this. It's going to mess it up for the electoral. If you're violent, if they can say these things about you, it's all like it's all a tactic, and it is destabilizing to infrastructure to have these like big flashpoints where a ton of capital comes in and then it leaves really quickly. Like that is really hard for infrastructure to survive because it becomes very quickly reliant on that, and it's very destabilizing. And I think that's also why it's such a like nefarious counterinsurgency tactic, because it makes things very unpredictable, makes you reliant upon capital. It isn't about long termism. It's like the argument I hear most often for electoralism is it's just means to the end, like ends justify the means, and justify the means, and justify the means, until you like find yourself as a Democrat in the Democratic Party. So yeah, I have a low threshold for like cognitive dissonance for this stuff. So I've gotten to like, I'm just not going to talk about it. Like, I'm not going to like give it airtime. I'm not going to like give it legitimacy. I'm going to focus on the other part of the spectrum, because like at the end of the
Because it is
day,
not 2020 anymore. It's
yes.
happening now, tonight, 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 tonight. Like all the shit's going on
Hmm.
now. Sorry, what were you saying?
I mean, I love focusing on the South too, because it's so indicative to me of people and what they actually care about. Because when it gets to be election season, all of a sudden everyone cares about the election. However, when we talk about issues, they're like, oh my gosh, like Trump could do XYZ. And it's like, oh, okay. So you only care about it happening to white rich people, because XYZ is already happening to innumerable marginalized groups in the imperial core today, and has been since the establishment of the empire, since the genocide of the indigenous Americans, like the indigenous people of Turtle Island. Like that's been happening. So you are very
Mhm.
clearly telling me you only care about it when it's possibly going to affect you marginally. And it's like it just gets turned up in the South, because people are like, oh yeah, the South is where is this demonic place where people are so backwards. And it's like, okay, so you don't actually care, right? Because if you look at the demographics of the South, this is where the highest concentration of Black people are. This is where the highest concentration of LGBTQ people are. Like it's it's just very indicative of me, of like it concentrates so many resources so fast, and the people that are the most outspoken about it and feel the strongest aren't there for the long term, aren't there for the most marginalized. It's only when it could possibly affect them. I don't know, I've gotten on a bit of a tangent, but I feel like it's very my gripe, my criticisms of electoralism, and like the ways that it consolidates resources, and like we were saying with the referendum, of like also like works to demonize militants, is just a good reflection of the South. Because the criticisms I grew up with, and like I've constantly seen, are like, oh, when it comes to an election, like if you don't vote for me, fuck you. Like you deserve. Like people will laugh about how the policy is getting passed in the South, and say like, oh, they asked for this, right? But when you ask the question of, well, what if you can't vote? What if they call you a felon and then you can't vote? Somehow, everyone in the South, which I deem to be an occupied territory, it is
Mhm.
occupied by
Mhm.
this white supremacist genocidal empire. All of a sudden, like it's actually the marginalized people that are to blame because they didn't vote, even if they couldn't, even if they were that right was taken away from them, still their fault. It's just such insidious propaganda. And so yeah, that's also why I like to focus on the South, because it is wildly under indexed any positive voices talking about us. It's like whenever I see us on CSN or any CNN or anything like that, it's like, oh, that backwards, horrible country where they vote against their own interests. Wow, how dumb, And it's like, no, there's a lot going on here. There are a lot of people militantly opposing this horrendous system. And it's actually, the bad stuff is getting imposed upon us violently. So it's not our fault. We are working actively to fight it. And you know what? If you think it's our fault, then shut up or get better or shut the fuck up. I can be a little like aggressive against those criticisms because so they're ultimately racist. Like if you look at who you're criticizing, you're just being racist. So sorry. Yeah.
Can I play? You actually did a clip about this relating to a story in Miami. Can I play that clip, that reel that you did? Because you touched on this and I saw it. So this is Siobhán's Down South News page, all these beautiful reels. And here's one that you never
doesn't care about marginalized people. The South is where the highest concentration of Black folks in the entire country is. But according to this logic, as long as the states are red, then they aren't worth caring about. And so that, by proxy, means all of the people in them, including all of the marginalized people, of which they are the most concentrated in the entire country, are also not worth caring about. Not caring about red states just means that you don't care about marginalized folks, because the fact that marginalized folks are in them doesn't change election by election. Those people are still getting oppressed day in, day out, and still need support day in, day out. So if you only care about them when a state's a certain color, you just don't care about them at all. This person.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Clap to anyone watching. No, it's so relatable, and it's being like a media industry worker, like being a journalist who has spent like a considerable amount of time pleading with other outlets outside of the South to give a fuck. It's exhausting, and that's why I keep choosing this like DIY, like mutual aid infrastructures. Like as much as like I wish that I get national outlets that I think are doing like quality work, for the most part. But like my main thing with them like is like y'all don't cover the South enough, and like so therefore like y'all are late to the game about everything because it's like. I got texts from people outside of the South that used to live here, like Trump's in office again, blah, 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 getting all these like kind of like, well-meaning but patronizing. Like, oh, I can't imagine how it is in Georgia. And I was like, told one person, I was like, if anyone is mentally prepared for this shit, it's Atlanta. Because like we went through Cop City being passed, like non-consensually, anti-democratically, like we experienced that. Now that's happening 77 times over throughout the US. That's more than one facility per state. Like, why on earth do you need this many police training facilities when, in the case of Atlanta, there was already like a place where they could have just like remodeled the one that they had. Would have cost so much less money, would not have been a whole thing. But like, they wanted this to happen so bad. Like, so we went through that. Protesters being deemed domestic terrorists, check. December 2022.
Yeah, been there, done that. I mean,
and I believe it's happening in New York. Like, it's happening in like other places now. And then like the RICO came. And so these things are like, back to the mutual aid importance, like, our conversation about that. It's like the resistance in the South is so powerful because it matches like the level of repression that we have to resist. So like that's why like wherever like there's a strong mutual aid community, it's usually because there is not a state that's helping them, that's lifting a fucking finger. Like when I was in Seattle, when I was living in Seattle on accident, long story. But it was like kind of a weird, like, I love Seattle. I met cool people there. I met the lefties in Seattle, but there was just like a difference. It's like it was like drinking watered down tea or something, like, or the
A
tea
very
wasn't
Southern
steeped long enough.
reference. That's
It
great.
is, right? That's so funny to me too. But like, it was like, I need help with something, and it was kind of this vibe of like, oh, you just like sign up for state healthcare. Like you can jump on like state healthcare. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
great. But kind of a vibe of like, why are you asking me? Like, go get a state provided service. And I was just like, oh, that's so interesting that you can do that. And like I did. And I
Hmm.
had like free therapy and free housing and like free, like all this stuff that was being provided through
Wow.
organizations. But like that's just not happening here. So it's like we really are all we have in the South. And that is why the love that I feel in community, like in the music community in Atlanta, where you can come see them at Mainline Music Fest. That's why like the love is so strong too, because like we feel that in our core, like in our bones. Like we are really all we have.
Hmm.
And what I see happening is like into the descent of authoritarianism is that how it's been in the South, it's like, oh, it's gonna be everyone. Like it's gonna be an everyone problem. It's not
Yeah.
gonna be Southern specific, but willing to build bridges and build community across different regions because like ultimately I think like something that hopefully we're all gonna have in common is like wanting to dismantle like a fascist state,
Yeah.
so
No, truly, what I've gotten to with Stop Cop City, my takeaway that I tell people and I like evangelize is it's a template. Like Palestine is the template for the South, is the template for the entirety of Turtle Island. Like it's coming to a city near you. This is the same playbook. There's something optimistic about that. They are not original. They are rolling out.
mhm,
I mean, in DC right now, they're rolling out the outside agitator trope. Like it is the same textbook, right? So we developed a textbook for how to fight it. The Palestinian resistance has developed that textbook. In Atlanta, they developed a
mhm.
textbook. Like, if you want to know what's happening, pay attention to the South because it's coming to you and don't have to replicate this work. Like, it's important to pay attention to because we're doing the work down here. And the sooner you stop demonizing and looking down upon and being chauvinistic about the South, the sooner you can learn that, like, oh, there's a lot to learn here. And actually, the South is pretty awesome. Like, we've got a lot of cool stuff going on. So, yeah,
I
I'm
love
such
the
an
South.
evangelist about that. Yeah.
I love the South, and I've been like loving Los Angeles as well. Like the way that LA has responded as a community against ICE, like was also very inspiring for me.
Talk about
But
community infrastructure. Like,
they're
that wasn't a
they're the
party responding.
Southwest. Yeah. Wait,
Yeah.
yeah, like someone I had on our podcast, which like is archived, Cecilia Prado from Nashville, amazing labor organizer, originally from Mexico, who's in Nashville, like spoke about it was like her analysis of LA that had me invite her on to specifically unpack this. But like it's like why are two like Southern organizers talking about what's happening in LA? And it's like because there was like it was like so refreshing to see like something non-electoral organizing. This was just people in the community, and like that's what it's going to come down to is that like we're going to have to be like prepared like to take it into our own hands and be there for each other to resist because like a nonprofit isn't going to do it.
Hmm.
Like, and Cecilia was the person saying like notice that like the folks that are supporting each other and like resisting ICE, trying to keep ICE out, there are people that like live directly in these communities and they're not career activists. They're not like an executive director of a nonprofit like might swoop in and do a press conference, but like the people like on the ground that like know, and that's the thing is that like I don't love how the nonprofit industrial complex is just like another way for a ton of resources to be redlined, just like the
Hmm.
government does, because it's like there's so much red tape around like financial resources and provisions that like a nonprofit might provide. And I went to um, a survivors summit in LA earlier this or in August, and like survivors of it from abuse. And it was like people who have survived gender-based violence and domestic violence came together at the summit. But I went to like a panel, and I think I'm gonna have one of the speakers of that panel on the show named Sable come on. But they were talking about the power of unrestricted cash. And what they mean by that is like resources that are freely given without strings attached. So it's like a lot of like, you know, nonprofits might make a choice. And I know that there's some nonprofits like Free From who put on the summit that have unrestricted cash programs, meaning that there's not a lot of red tape around it. There's like, you don't have to have a job. Like, because if you're a survivor of domestic violence, like, it's so hard to work. Like, I just, like, that's the thing. Like, but like, the other thing about like survivors knowing what their needs are. And that's what I think about the South. It's like people always want to come in and like tell people in marginalized communities like what they need and how to organize and how to go about it. And I think that is so dismissive because it's like in the South, particularly, and like, you know, people like in the margins have been surviving like a lot of abuse. Like everything we're talking about is systemic abuse by like a genocidal slave state, you know? So it's like survivors that are directly affected by that know what their needs are and know how to take it. They just need like the resources and access to resources sometimes. And a lot of times with nonprofits, there's just all this like red tape. So like if you're given money from a grant, a lot of times like you can't use that money for anything other than like an explicit purpose. Like there's strings attached to it a lot of times. So like, yeah, so there's like a lot of there's like a sad element to like we're really all we have because no one's coming to save us, but there's also like a lot of empowerment if you like read it kind of from the other angle of just like, well, if we're all we got, like I better make sure I fuck with you. You know what I'm saying? Like we gotta like we need to build some strong networks, and that's like what we're doing at Mainline, and that's why I wanted to like invite you on today as well, because was just so stoked to see you like just doing it. Like that's the other thing is like just do it. Like don't wait for like we are literally like at the moment like climate change is here. Fascism is here. Like tonight. It's happening now. So like do not wait for someone else to have the big idea. Like if you have the idea and you want to pick up that microphone and you want to tell that story and you want to like go interview someone, like fuck it, just do it. Like it is necessary. Like we do need it because we need narrative warfare. And like, you know, shameless plug, like join our media trainings at Mainline because we're literally giving this out practically for free. Like all these like levels of knowledge of people that have studied this and done it for like years that like a lot of people would maybe charge you like a bunch of money to have this like course and curriculum. But you can, I was telling Siobhán, like you can come on, pay like $10 one time, download all of our trainings and then like dip. Start teaching yourself like DIY that shit.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And plus the shill. Yeah, get the trainings. But yeah, I mean, hell yeah. The just do it is like is what I like to end videos on, because it's like also when you were saying like people coming
That's
down
so
from the
Nike,
north.
by the way.
Yeah. Oh no, not a sponsorship. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, no, exactly. When you were saying too, like it's people coming down and to the south and like telling us what our needs are too, I was like, man, like carpetbagging hasn't ended, has it? That's what a pattern here. Don't wait for someone with a bunch of capital to come and like tell you that you can do this thing. I think that's my biggest push, and it's also not just like do it now, but it's like do it in a way that's sustainable and long term, because I think that is like the juxtaposition to electoralism. That's the juxtaposition to like capital, you know, funded like 6-month campaigns or like big hype cycles, is like when you do stuff every week, day in, day out, like every week for 3 years, when you do it for 5 years, like that is how real relationships are formed, and like the trust is built and the infrastructure is built that they have in like LA, for example, amongst immigrant communities, for example, is like these people know each other. They fuck with each other. They trust each other. Yes. Better than Yankees. It's great. It's very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you need to like show up for each other consistently and just do it. And it can start really small. In fact, I saw a really good video a little bit ago that like someone was talking about their introduction to mutual aid, and like they were really nervous to go to their first distro, like food distribution, and they got a really good piece of feedback that I've started giving people too, which is actually when you show up, like not only don't feel nervous that you don't know what to do, it is very okay to not do anything and to just watch and learn. Like, you don't have to show up and immediately want to do everything. You can start at zero and just start showing up like every week, every month, and be consistent in that regard. And as you build relationships with people and learn what's needed, you can slot in where it's sustainable and where you can see yourself doing this for like 2 to 5 years. Because especially in the Imperial Core, everybody, it's a very short term mindset. Like, it's a very like, I'm excited about this. I'm going to go 100%. I'm going to burn out. Whereas I think like, if we want to build infrastructure that is resilient and like here for the long term, and if we actually want to talk about building a society post empire, like a turtle island that is for everyone and is, you know, not imperial and doesn't have the boots on the necks of the oppressed nations, then we got to start thinking in the 5 to 10 year time frame. We can't just do this on an election cycle and then burn out for 3 years. So yeah, just do it. Incredible. I didn't even think about copying that slogan.
Fucking just do it. Like, that's it.
Bingo.
Fucking just do it. Like, that's
a great screen grab.
We don't have any time to waste, you know. And it's just like the other thing that, like, the last thing I'll say, because I could talk to you for hours. I look forward to having you on again. Like, this was a lot of fun. Like,
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah, and so one thing I wanted to say, and the last thing I'll say before we wrap is, like, you were touching on something I think that's also very important to reflect on is the importance of like relationship building. And that's the other thing, is that mutual aid is the result of like relationshiping, which is like when I was doing a lot of like decolonization and abolitionist workshops and like my training as a, you know, decolonizing journalist, where like there was this phase in 2022 where I was doing a lot of that. I was like unlearning a lot of the shit I learned, you know, when I was getting my bachelor's in journalism, when I was being trained to be like a Western journalist, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And thank God for all the people that taught me, you know, like Black and Indigenous teachers who would talk to me about things that like you wouldn't even think had anything to do with anything political, but like we say that political is personal and personal is political for a reason, because like the etymology of the word politics like literally does break down to like how you are in relationship with people, like how you act in relationship with other people. And so like this idea that like you need to like plop into a thing and be productive and be busy like immediately is such a capitalist like notion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's internalized capitalism. And so like anytime I'm feeling like something like internal is kind of like echoing to me, like that's encouraging me to isolate myself, to not go build community, to not go build relationships, you know, I kind of need to question what the source of that is. Like, is it internalized capitalism? You know, is it like self-reliance, you know, trying to run the show? Because like just showing up and being non-productive and shooting the shit with your friends, like, or meeting people at a food distro, it's lending to like a bigger resource in the end, because like that's the thing, is that like, you know, racial capitalism, the genocidal machine, like wants to silo all of us off so that we're not talking to each other, then we're not building together, because it knows that like we're not strong apart, like because alone like I'm fucked. But like I feel most secure when I think about like the community in Atlanta. Like I do. Like as things have escalated and happened since Trump has been in office, something that has really grounded me has been like where I am right now at Liminal Space Collective. We run on this like collectivized mutual aid model. No one's making a profit off of anyone. We are all equals. We are all peers. And like, I feel this sense of safety net, and it's all from like relationships, you know? So like, if shit hits the fan, I know I have somewhere to go. I have people to call. Like there are spaces to go, and they feel like few and far between, but that's the importance of just showing up and planting those seeds. And Indigenous organizers talk about this a lot, because like relationshiping is one of like the most important tenets like in their lineage, like in that heritage, is like building relationship with each other and letting our relationships be mirrors for one another. So just fucking do it. Fucking just do it. Go to the thing. Like, I know it's awkward and I know it's weird, but like better than being at home on our phones and like siloed off and like staring at a screen. a great opportunity. Fucking just do it. Just come to Mainline Music Fest, September 5th through the 7th. You can go there. Fucking just do it. Come to our media trainings. We have such a cool community of people. Fucking just do it. Follow Down South News on Instagram. Where can people find you? Is this the main thing?
That link, and then we also we're on TikTok at Down South News, so you can follow us there. That's where we're mainly posting right now. Eventually, I mean, we're gonna practice what we preach, and eventually gonna look into doing like Substack and stuff like that. But right now, just TikTok and Instagram.
Although Substack has been flagged for being neo-Nazi, a little too supportive neo-Nazis. Like someone sent me an article about it recently. So I think that we might start divesting from our time on Substack as well.
Okay, good to know.
I do recommend Patreon, though. I do recommend Patreon.
Okay, sick.
It's been really good for us.
Idea.
So I encourage you to do your own research because I am coming in a little green myself with the Substack thing, but I did just want to flag that for you, that it's a thing, so that you don't start a thing and then find out later that maybe it was a bad platform, like an evil platform. Like I am in the middle of it now. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we're going to end the stream now. Thank you all for watching on the playback and for tuning in.
Bye.